Hey, welcome back to Coaches at Crown Brew Getting Coffee. We're glad you're joining us today. Got another great guest, Coach Rick Metcalf, one of the legends of Southern Illinois, and I can't wait to talk to him about his career and about basketball, boys and girls both. I want to thank Crown Brew for letting us be here today. I want to give a shout out to Swinford Media, and I want to make sure you know how much we appreciate them letting us do this, and Ross and Abby are here today. And also Ross has Swinford Weddings Videography. If you've got a wedding plan for the future and know someone that does, this guy can capture all that for you and keep those memories alive. I want to thank a new sponsor today, Marion Plumbing, and my buddy Tony Gooch. Do residential and commercial plumbing. They've done a lot of plumbing for me, and I know how good they are. So if you have plumbing needs, Tony Gooch at Marion Plumbing is perfect for that. And thank my buddies at Adrenaline Fundraising. Jeff and Matt are phenomenal at helping coaches and organizations raise the money they need to keep their programs at a high level and kind of fill in those gaps that schools just can't afford to take care of anymore and get those extras your athletes might need. So we're going to jump right in. Welcome, Coach Metcalf. We're glad to have you today. I'm going to run through some highlights of your career, and then we're going to start talking. You coached at Joppa from 84 to 86, Kankakee Community College, 86 to 87, Murray State from 87 to 90, Sesser-Valier, that's where I remember you most in my career, from 90 to 2004, Vienna Boys, 04 to 08, Sesser-Valier Girls from 2010 to 2019, back to Vienna for the girls from 2020 to the present. You've coached IBCA All-Star teams. You're a Hall of Famer. Congratulations. Inducted in 2009 to the IBCA Hall of Fame. I love this stat. These next two are special. Every player you've ever coached has played on at least or won at least one championship, and you've had one losing season between 1984 and 2025. 62 championships in all, a record of 715 and 233. That's impressive, my friend. Congratulations.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
First off, I just want to say this is how cool this is. I'm sitting here with Coach Martin. I've got a captive audience. He's not going anywhere. And I get to talk about two of my favorite subjects.
Yeah.
Basketball and me.
Yeah. That's awesome. So let's start with where you grew up.
Okay. I grew up at Bradley, graduated in 1977, played at Bradley Bourbonnais High School, big school, 2A, 1600. I didn't start playing high school ball till I was a sophomore in high school.
Wow.
I was kind of a fat little pudgy kid, and all of a sudden, my sophomore year, I shot up.
Yeah.
I was what you would call a gym rat at the YMCA.
Yeah.
Pickup guy. We'd go to McBroom Park. I love street ball.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. Then all of a sudden, it's like, wait a minute, who's that guy? I popped up to 6'7", lost about 20 pounds.
Did the coach pursue you when he saw you?
No, it's just first everybody else did. All of a sudden the girls were like, "Who's that guy?" It was kind of cool. But I'll backtrack a little bit. Like when I was at the YMCA, I had a guy that was constantly pushing me. There, and a lot of your viewers might remember who he is Mike Root.
Oh, wow.
He was up at Kankakee McNamara at the time. And he was like a supervisor at the YMCA because he coached at Kankakee McNamara as well.
Yeah.
And one of his jobs was making sure everything stayed pretty straight in the gym, which in the 70s, that was a pretty tough job to do. Believe me. Because, there's a lot of stuff that went on. But Mike tells this story a little bit better than me. But junior year, I weighed about 190 pounds, and one of his jobs was closing the gym up about 10 o'clock at night. And he'd go in there, and they had this partition in the middle of the gym, about a foot off, and he just looked down, underneath it, make sure no one's there. Well, this one night, it's moving. The partition's moving. Well, he goes over there, he undoes the partition, and there I am holding the basketball at 10 o'clock at night. Hey, Coach, Rick, what are you doing? What I was doing was I was hiding out.
Of course.
But, and so he brags to this day about that he caught me. Well, he caught me one time.
Yeah. That's the one time he caught you.
That's my Mike Root story.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing that because it's so, you two become such iconic figures in Southern Illinois sports, but you had a connection all the way up there years and years ago. That's really cool. Right. You have siblings growing up?
Yeah, I've got one brother. He really wasn't into sports too much, and he did his thing. Mom and dad. My dad's originally from Polk County.
Oh, okay.
Moved up to Kankakee. Worked on the South Side Chicago 43 years at Chicago Stamping Plant, Ford Motor Company.
Gotcha.
So that's why he stayed up there. But getting back to the Bradley thing, 2A school, 1,600 kids. We didn't even know what 1A was. It was a two-class system back then.
Right. Right.
And this one day, just throw this out there, we were going to Grant Park to watch this kid because this kid had this big, he's scoring like 40 points a game, but it was 1A. So me and a guy named Todd Haynes, who actually played at Davidson all 4 years and got drafted in the NBA. He was our starting center, ended up being a lawyer from State Farm for 20 years. So we're going over there to Grant Park. We go into the gym. Oh man, we thought we were running late. Oh, it's the JV game. It was the varsity game.
Oh my gosh.
But that's the difference between the 2 and 1A.
Right.
And we just kind of looked at each other and just kind of laughed a little bit. Fast forward, he goes to Kankakee Community College where I went. The kid only lasted about a week. Because the talent level that he was playing against was so low. I scored no more 5-7 points a game pretty much my whole career. Well, we were stacked. We were ranked third in the state. In AA. I was the small forward at 6'7". I played NAI ball.
Yeah.
He plays at Davidson, and our power forward went to the University of Kentucky on a football scholarship.
Wow.
We were pretty big. Overall, and when, as you guys know, being here from Marion, when you're playing against the bigger schools, you got to travel. So we'd shoot up into Chicago, Rich South, Rich East, Joliet Central, and all those guys. So you'd travel maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours into the city, and you wouldn't think nothing of it on a school night. Because that's just the way it was, back then.
Yeah, when I first got here, our schedule was pretty local, but boy, over time, it got to where we were really stretching it out, going as far as Galesburg, Haywood County, Tennessee. And
you had to have a choice.
You have a choice, and that's just the way it is. And those South 7 teams that still remain, like Marion and Carbondale, had to really learn how to pack some bags and get on some buses and go. So I know what you're talking about. Did you at any time when you're in high school or playing college ball, was coaching already in your mind?
And people can tell you this, my passion for basketball hasn't changed. I love it. I love every aspect of it. I watch it 24/7. I'm constantly trying to find new stuff. It's just in me, and I still got it after coaching for 34 years. And actually, it's like 41 overall. You mentioned I got my start at Joppa. I actually coached for 2 years at the Mayville College when I was 21, 22. I was just a kid.
Yeah.
And I actually had kids that were older than me. So here I am. I'm 66 right now. I got ex-players that are like 75. There's something wrong with that.
Not everybody can say that, yeah.
But when I went to Kankakee Community College, I always knew I was going to go there. Hall of Fame coach Denny Lanus. I thought I was going to go into law enforcement. So, I took some classes in that, and we thought that was pretty cool. I thought it was pretty cool all the way until they put a gun in my hand. I thought, this isn't a good idea.
Yeah.
But it worked out pretty good. Like I said, I played for a Hall of Fame coach, and
Sure.
We had great success those 2 years, and it worked out pretty good for me.
Your coaching style, which we'll talk about in more detail later, but are you at this time already picking up things from the coaches you're playing for, high school and college, that you're like,
oh yeah,
yeah,
100%.
Yeah.
After the junior college, I wanted to go on. But I knew I was 6'7" and I weighed like 195 pounds.
Yeah.
And back in that time period, in the 70s, you might remember, it was not looked upon highly to lift weights.
Oh, no.
You didn't
It'll mess up your shot.
Mess up your shot.
Yeah,
well, I
yeah.
wasn't going to touch no dang weight. Because I could shoot it at 6'7".
Yeah.
So that was, obviously we know better now.
Yeah.
But I worked in a factory, A.O. Smith, for a year and 2 summers, made harvester water heaters. I might have put a rivet in a silo or something. But, I knew I was going to go back. But during that time, I was playing industrial ball up in Chicago. Pretty rough ball.
Yeah.
Pretty tough.
Yeah.
Overall. But I knew by working in the college or working at the factory, I got to get out of here.
Yeah.
And a guy named Coach Gunther at the University of North Dakota, Daryl Lanus, Coach Lanus's brother, was assistant there. Goes, we'll get you up here, but I'm going to be honest with you, you ain't going to play that much. You're going to be, pure honesty. know, 13th, 14th man, but you're going to get your education. You know,
Right.
you're going to help us out in the lab. So, okay, whatever. But I got to get out of here, you know, out of the factory.
Yeah.
Called me back a couple of weeks later and said, hey, there's this little NAIA school. You know, you could go down Mayville State. It's a teacher's institution. You can go down there and you'll play. You know, well, I wanted to play.
Yeah,
you
of
know,
course.
get the education and that. So me and my grandfather, we went up there. Didn't know anybody. Go in there, meet the head coach. This guy named Pierre Ducharme. He's kind of like a living legend up there. He gets me in his living room, and he offers me a beer. You know, and I'm coming from a discipline program.
That's the first time. Yeah.
He offers me a beer. And I, you know, no, sir. I don't. And then I ask him, I go, so, sir, what's your philosophy on coaching? And he looks at me, he looks at my grandpa, and he goes, well, we plan on getting up 100 shots a game and making half of them. I'm in.
Yeah.
You know,
What kid wouldn't love that?
Yeah. So,
yeah.
you know, looking at now, I know though. I came from a discipline program to the max. I mean, there was rules on top of rules. This guy had no rules, none. So, you know, the contrast was unbelievable.
Wow.
So you pick and choose. You know, it was.
Sure.
They had kegs at the games. I mean, up in the stands. It was
Really?
nuts. You know, it's totally. It was just a, you know, but I did get a few things, you know, out of that.
Sure.
But that's, you know, I went up there, lucked out, walked off with a double major, you know, social studies and PE.
Social studies guy.
Yeah, I'm a
love
social
it. Yeah,
studies
me
guy.
too.
And, yeah, that's how that all, you know, then right out of school, I go back to Kankakee, and I thought at the time I was just going to like sub and work at the college with Coach Lannis again. And I applied for a job down at Joppa.
Did you know anything about it? I mean, I know you said your dad was from Poquet. Did you
Yes.
know, you knew something about it?
I knew it was that.
Okay.
I knew it was between Metropolis and Vienna from going down this way on vacations.
Right.
You know, little small town, whatever. Like Coach Lannis said, worst case scenario, you're going to get an interview for the experience.
Sure.
You know, so I went down there and I knocked it out of the water. I thought, you know, Tom Atkins was the principal Hall of Fame coach. You know, he liked everything I said. They needed a young guy. You know, that's what they were looking for. And I met the kids, and it was awesome. You know, the kids were all about it. Larry Jenkins I took his place. Some of y'all might remember. And then he came here to Marion
that's right.
to coach. So I took his position. You know, and he left everything in, you know, good order and all that. I was the youngest AD in the state of Illinois. In '84, youngest coach. You know, thought I knew everything. You know, Ed like that. Didn't know squat. You know, still don't. But yeah, it was a great place to start. We went 16-8 that year, and they've only had one winning season since, and that was in '84. And then my second year, when the only time I had a losing record was in '85.
I have been fascinated, Coach, by the number of Hall of Fame, successful, legendary coaches that have sat in that chair with me and told me how young they started. Because I started at 25, way too young to actually start, but it was at Sparta and nobody wanted the job.
Right.
But over and over again, I have heard these great coaches, and to be honest with you, coming into this, I didn't expect that. But I think a lot of times we have a lot to learn, and sometimes the best way to learn is just to go for it, right? Yeah. And because you got to learn fast, and you've got to study, and you've got to prepare, and
people, I don't think kids are allowed that today. You know, in today's environment, culture, you know, whatever you want to call it, because they want everything now. I want to give a little shout out to a guy too, and we were hated rivals at the time, and a guy named Jerry Qualls out of Goreville.
Of course.
You know, my second year at Joppa, you know, we were struggling, and he came up to me and he said, Rick, it seems like you really enjoy coaching basketball and that, but you're going to have to get out of here or no one in Southern Illinois is going to hire you. You know, and it was like I got hit in the head with a baseball bat. You know, here I got this little, you know, guy telling me this stuff, you know. Yeah, I was so arrogant. I wasn't going to listen to nobody, but I'm like, he's right. And then that's when I left there, went back up to Kankakee, got on as assistant, went 34-6.
Was that a 2 years or 1 year you went back up there?
I went back up there for one
season.
I went up there for one season, went 34-6, got eighth in the country. You know, we got guys like Jerry Tarkanian, you know, and people like that.
Yeah.
It was like who's who in Division I coming and checking out our players.
Of course.
And I'm like, hey, this is pretty cool.
Yeah.
You know, that was the first Final Four I went to, was that year. Well, a lot of coaches know you don't go to the Final Fours for the games. You go for the NABC, the National Association of Basketball Coaches. And I've been to 18 of them, you know, in my life, because that's where you pick up all your good stuff. Because it's clinic heaven 24/7 for like 4 straight days.
Boy, they say that's the networking central too. Boy, it's connections and
it
meeting
is.
people, and yeah.
Yeah, and I love that stuff. I wasn't really looking. Well, that first year I had my resume, and I had the khakis, the white shirt, the tie, and Coach Lane had said, just hand it out to anybody. I literally was in an elevator with Coach Lou Henson from U of I.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, what the heck? So, Coach Henson, here's my resume. I'm looking for a grad assistant job or a student manager.
Yeah.
The worst thing he's going to do, maybe look at it when he goes back upstairs to change clothes or whatever, and toss it, But he did call back. He called back personally.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that, because a lot of them would have, somebody else, like a secretary or something.
He seems like he might do that, though. He seemed like a good dude.
Well, he was always around Kankakee because we had a kid a couple years later named Andy Capetti, who was a starting center for U of I.
Yeah.
And then Coach Nagy, Dick Nagy, who obviously is the father to coach here at SIU. So I kind of got to know him a little bit. And then you really fast forward, when I took the Sesser job, Coach Nagy was a little bit on Scott Brzezinski, one of my players.
Yeah.
But he was honest with Scott, and Scott he tells his story really great. Scott, we like you, but you ain't gonna play here. He told him the truth, but Scott goes, he got a T-shirt out of the deal. It's kind of hilarious. But he gave me 10 tickets, not 1 or 2, 10 to the Illinois-Missouri game.
Oh wow! That's a
that,
big deal.
That was pretty.
Oh
sweet.
Yeah, that was back in the day. That was a big deal. Yeah. You went back. Let's see. Then you go to Murray State.
Correct. So, a couple things fell through. I was supposed to go to Youngstown State. Something bad happened to the head coach. He passed away and stuff. But so I was literally out. So Coach Newton at the time, he was the head coach. He goes, "You come down here. We got a basketball camp for a week, and we'll watch you." Nobody worked harder than I did that week. And when you go to camps, how you are. I did all the extra officiating. I watched the rooms. I did everything. I was the gopher for anybody that wanted anything done for a week. I did it. I'm having a blast while I'm doing it, at the same time. But at the same time, you're hoping you're going to get the gig.
Of course.
And Coach Burnson, who was the top assistant at the time, and he ended up being the head coach at Southwest Missouri a few years later. He goes, "Well, yeah, we like you. We like your work ethic and everything." So, they took me. So.
Wow.
Yeah, that all happened from, and then I go down to Murray as a grad assistant, and then the professors had me monitoring the tests, and all that business. Yeah, it was a great gig. I did that for 3 years.
Were you thinking college was going to be where you're
at that time? That's all I wanted to do.
That's all you wanted to do.
And that my mind was set.
Because your personality, you're kind of that coaching grinder, and that's the college game. So it sounds like you were well set up for a career.
I was set.
And you coached some dudes at Murray State at that time, right?
Yes, we I felt fortunate. I was a little nervous being around Coach Newton the first time. Coach Burns goes, "Oh, go sit over there by him." They were in a pickup game, and I went over there and sit by him, and they're running up and down the floor, and he goes, "Well, what do you think there, Rick?" And I go, "Well, Coach, is this right that we're picked 5th in the conference?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I go, "Well, if we're 5th, I want to see who's better."
Yeah.
You got Jeff Martin, who played in the NBA, and you guys, guys like that, out there. I'm like, holy, and obviously we won the OVC that year, and got ranked in the country and all that business. Popeye Jones comes aboard.
Popeye Jones, yep.
God love him. A lot of people don't know this about Popeye. 6'8", okay, hands come out to here on me. He was a 309-pound, 6'8" shortstop. In Dresden, Tennessee.
You told me that when we first contacted each other, and I said, I want to film with that. I want to see that guy play.
Softest hands you've ever seen.
I'd love to see it.
To this day, Charles Barkley says that he was the toughest guy to guard because their rears were about the same. And Popeye, he ended up playing in the league, I want to say 11 years, 12.
Yeah.
And then the staff, he coached for 10. The staff just got let go at Denver.
Yeah.
He was part of that, out there. But I got some good Popeye stories.
Yeah.
But some, as you well know, and you can talk to any grad assistant, some of the stuff you do to keep the program behind the scenes still going is unbelievable.
Yeah.
One quick story, I won't mention his name. Coach Noon tells me, drop everything you're doing, make sure this kid gets to class. No matter what, make sure. You understand. Okay, that's your boss telling you, So I'm literally knocking on his door, taking him by his hand. All he's got to do is show up, right?
Yeah.
He just has to go to class.
Yeah.
So biology, he walks in the door, I walk around, he comes out, he's coming out the back end of the building. I mean, that's some of the stuff.
Yeah.
Then you got to march the kid back in.
He's just got to go.
Back in that time period,
Yeah.
you did a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, and you asked me this a couple times, when your head coach told you to do something, you did it yesterday.
Yeah.
When your boss told you to, that's just how D1 people are, generally speaking.
Yeah.
I like to say it's like Ray O'Reilly on MASH. Get it done. You already want it done before it comes out of the guy's mouth.
Right.
And that's one place where I have a problem at, being a high school coach, is because I'll get to it when I get to it. Sometimes that mentality comes into play.
Yeah, but you're paying your dues, and it looks like you were set up to have a career.
Yeah.
And then you end up as the head basketball coach at Sesser-Valier. So what was it at Murray to the Sesser? How did that transition occur?
Okay. Second year we did the NIT and all that. We were ranked ahead of Kentucky. Third year we got beat by Michigan State, and coach is going someplace.
Yeah.
I wanted to hang out one more year. I'm already 3 years in.
Right.
And I went grad assistant, what was called back then restricted earnings.
Right.
Back in that, and then your next step is an assistant coach. If I could have held out one more year, woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Yeah.
That's what you think on stuff like that. But I got married in '89.
Okay.
We already had one child, had one in the cooker, so to speak. And coach is getting ready to go to South Carolina. So and my wife's from the metropolis area, over there, and so we chose to stay in the area. So that's basically how that happened.
Just wanted to settle a bit?
Well, I wanted to stay into coach. To be honest with you, I thought I was only going to be there 2 years and just go off of Brzezinski. Scott.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. But, and then, Scott was always going to go to SIU. That was from the get-go. But then all of a sudden, wait a minute here, there's a whole bunch of talent coming up.
Yeah.
We looked way down there through the fourth grade. We're stacked.
Yeah.
And the previous staff didn't see that, because, everybody's like, well, we didn't see that coming. But we were loaded, and so you make the transition to high school. So, we move up to Sesser, culture shock. I'm coming from the team of Kankakee, Division I. We're playing Louisville. There's 19,000 people, Vanderbilt, people like that.
Yeah.
We're playing Michigan State and Knoxville. And my first game's at Waltonville.
Yeah. This is a big change.
And I'm looking around and I'm talking to myself, like, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
We got down, I want to say it was 16 points in the first half. It was double figures. It was brutal. But everybody knows how I am. I'm a player's coach. You'll never hear an argument from any of my players on that. If you got a suggestion, you come say something. And I've said that from day one. Kid, I'll give him a shout out. Dave Smith comes from the end of the bench. I'm like, does he really think he's going to go in? He goes, hey, coach, what do you think about pure offense? I'm thinking, well, that ain't going to work. Whatever. I said, well, heck, nothing else is working. And
why not?
It was something as simple as moving Scott up around the free throw line. We kept getting Scott the ball, and he just kept passing right, left, and we just kept zinging threes. We came back and won that game.
Wow.
So you would have thought, I won a World Series or something where everybody – but it was, the Waltonville Sesser.
Yeah.
The previous year they went to Super, and all that. And then I found out that Sesser didn't beat them in the previous 10 years.
Oh, wow.
So that was a big.
It was a big deal.
It was a big, small school, basketball.
Yeah.
But then after that, it just kind of took off.
It's funny how you don't always know the situation. I took the job at Flora, and we went over to Fairfield one year, my first year, and I didn't know that was their rival. I didn't know Fairfield was it. So I didn't know. I was, So we play them, we upset them, we beat them pretty bad. And as we're taking the lead, the fans behind me are just losing their minds. And I'm like, and my assistant coach goes, you don't get it, man. They hate Fairfield. I said, I didn't know, but now I do. Because Fairfield had dominated them for a period of time. you know, it had some ugly games. And so, but yeah, sometimes you get a sense of that at the moment it's happening.
I'm talking fans coming out of the stands, spitting on us, flipping us off, throwing rocks at our bus.
Oh my gosh.
It was, and people made it Ed Belva against me, and me and Ed Belva, we're as tight as thieves now. But back then, my life revolved around beating that man, and he would tell you the same thing.
Yeah.
But it was brutal.
That's a good matchup, you and Ed Belva.
Well, it was awesome.
That's a good matchup.
He knows this, and I've told him this more than once. He made me a better coach.
Yeah, that's right.
And there's a couple other guys that did too.
That's right.
Belva was good.
Ross Babington did that for me.
Yeah.
My first couple of times playing Ross, 94 and 95. He fooled me on some things. He would use some motion and distract us and then do something else. And I began to realize a lot of smoke and mirrors with Russ. Don't bite. And we
worked on that hard. I was his assistant on the football team back then. We
had to come up with a different coverage one year that we used to beat him. But again, I don't come up with that if he's not pushing me. And I told him that. I told his son that he made me. He's one of those guys that made me. I was young. I was learning, but he made me a better football coach.
Yeah.
Highlights of Sesser, obviously coaching Scott, but other things you remember. Just went through a great run. Yeah. My goodness, you were there for what did I say? We were there for 14, 15 seasons.
Yeah, I was the boys coach there for 14 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. No disrespect to Scott and those guys, but it didn't take off till about 2 years after they left.
I got you.
They were still extremely loyal to the previous coach. I get that.
Yeah.
A new guy comes in, different ways to skin a cat, so to speak. And it took a bit. We still went 27-3. Stuff like that. But then when that third year came, we started clicking.
Yeah.
I had a point guard. No disrespect again to the point guard I had. We just didn't have a true point guard.
Yeah.
And I've been blessed all these years. Since those 2 years, I've had a very good point guard my entire career. You got to have one. A kid named Scott Kirk. I think 261 assists. He still has the school record. Averaged 7 points a game and never shot 5 foot up.
I remember him. Yeah.
Ornery as ornery could be.
He was ornery on the football field too.
Oh yes, he was. But that's putting it politely. But he was my orneriness.
Yeah. And I remember watching him on the football field. Then I watched him in basketball, and that personality was you could tell he was a baller, man. He was tough.
So then he came in. That outfit played hard. People always bring up that word hard. They'd run through that with anything to beat you. It was about one thing and one thing only, the win, the W.
Yep.
And then Brock Babington, who you just mentioned.
Yep.
My first regional in 96, Brock was a part of that. Kid named Derek Mapes, Timmy McMurray, just great guys. Then we ended up getting beat by Nashville like everybody did back in that time period. And then C.J. Kirk. He comes in and he was just like his brother.
Yeah, I think CJ's the one I remember. Now that I say that, I think CJ's the one I remember.
And he's a head football coach, or he was been an assistant for 21 years, something like that. And he's getting a head football coach.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Job down in Kentucky.
Their dad was a coach.
Yes. Yeah. He was. Danny Kirk was my longtime assistant. Yeah. Kept me. And Danny knows how I feel about him. Danny kept me in line a lot.
Yeah.
You got to have those guys.
Of course.
Yeah. I was a little bit out there, and he was a lot more conservative than me, and he'd pull me back in. But I appreciate those days, with him. But we really took off during that period.
Yeah.
The 90s belonged to Sesser and Southern Illinois.
I remember seeing a lot of basketball back in those days, and the Sesser tournament was always. Well, how about that hospitality room?
Hospitality room was second to none.
It was the best. And I remember it was a cold day, and I didn't want to go. And someone said, "No, you've got to go to the tournament." I said, "Well, why?" They go, "You got to go eat." So we went and we ate. It was great.
Yeah, they worked hard on that. Ross let me run that for 14 years. And then my wife literally would take 1 week off for a vacation for 14 years to run that dang thing.
That was great.
Yeah.
It was legend. Everybody talked about it. So
yeah, she gave up a lot, shout out to the wife on that, she gave up the kids, and all that, helping out, that kind of stuff.
Do you, after 14 seasons, a lot of guys settle in and just kind of like, but you moved on.
Well, this is, people don't know the real reason pretty much why I left. Like I said, I'm an open gym guy. I'd have 30, 40, Chris Carr,
Yeah.
You never knew who was going to walk in the gym.
Yeah.
6 o'clock to 8, Metcalf's got that old gym open. You win or stay. You get your butts beat, you might get another game 30, 40 minutes down the line. Well, 6 to 8 usually meant 6 to 9. Something like I'm going to stay. Because I can still play back in those days too. So, I'm getting a workout and a little subtle talking in their ear, no yelling or screaming at them, just little subtle remarks, here and there. And then the next year came up, 2 kids show up.
Oh.
2.
Yeah.
Just 2. And then I remember looking out that old gym door and there was a kid, and he's actually a teacher coach now. He was riding his bike. I'll never forget that. Why ain't you at open gym?
Oh, yeah. Instead of being there. Yeah.
So then all during that time, I get a call from the mayor, John Simmons from Vienna. Hey, Coach Metcalf, we need you down here. We need you down here. I'm like, what? I'm not going all the way down there. And then, he started talking a little bit.
Yeah.
And then John Green was the head coach.
Yeah.
Superintendent now, and John was moving on, and I knew whatever Vienna had, they were going to be fundamentally sound. Didn't know too much about them. We won a couple tournaments down there a few years prior, probably with a lot less talent than Meridian and Vienna had back in that time period.
Sure.
People from Vienna remembered that. So it was just pure luck. So I had 4 freshmen coming in that were great freshmen.
Did you know that when you took the job? Or did you find that out afterwards?
I knew a little bit about them because when we went to team camp in Vincennes, they were there.
I got you.
But they were like little kids. At that time.
Yeah.
Brett was huge. Thompson.
Yeah.
He was about 6'8" then. And he was only 14 years old.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, these guys will be loyal to me. Right out the gate. And I thought, okay, I can do this for 4 years. I got 14 in at Sesser, 2 at Joppa. There's your 16 forward. That'll give me my 20.
Yeah.
Basically. And then I thought, okay, then I'll just ride off in the sunset. After that, my first time I went down there, I literally watched them play. Just up and down, and there's like 40 people in the gym. New coach. And they're playing, and guys are walking off the floor. And I asked my assistant, I go, why they walk? They're tired. What? They're tired? So I went down there and I said, no, that's not the way this works. You play the 15 by ones, win or stay.
Yeah.
When you're done, you're done. So then all of a sudden that picked up the level of competition to the max.
Yeah, that's
doing it that way.
Yeah.
Then there was a couple of guys I go, that weren't playing as hard as I would have liked. You guys go down there at the fresh off. Guys that were starters.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, this guy's serious.
Yeah. You got their attention.
It got their attention real quick, on that. Yeah. So and they still call me and that, and we're good friends in our business, so it's worked out pretty good.
You make a transition after that. You go back to Sesser and you coach girls basketball. First time you've done that.
Yeah.
So tell me about that transition from boys to girls.
Well, I did the, so I do that. I'm done. I'm done coaching, at the time.
After 4 years.
Had my 20 in, whatever. I'm literally sitting on, it was on a Thursday. I'm sitting there watching TV. My youngest daughter, she was a cheerleader in 8th grade, wants to play basketball, that's fine, whatever. Okay. I get a call on a Thursday from the athletic director. This is on a Thursday. The season started on that Monday.
Oh, my.
The head coach, Brian Gibson, great guy, very good friend.
I know Brian.
Yeah, very good guy. He got a job, I forget what field it was, but, he NAFLAC or something like that. He's gone. So, here it is, I didn't even know the girls' names. I had a meeting on a Sunday at my house, bought a bunch of pizzas and stuff. And, a couple of the parents come walking in, and I go, this is a meeting for, the coach and the players. Okay, we'll just stay over here outside. I go, no, there's no parents in my house, man. Get out of my house. But anyway, so that was a little touchy right out the gate.
Yeah.
But, that was quite the meeting. The girl who I thought was a stud the whole time, I give her a couple pizzas after and come to find out she's like 15th man. And she goes, no one's ever talked to me like that before. I felt like you were talking directly to me. But the adjustment, I get asked that a lot.
Yeah.
So especially since I've done it twice. But those first few years, I coached them the exact same way.
Did you?
I did.
And they accepted that.
Yeah, they did.
That's good. That's great.
I was pretty tough on them, the first few years, and then you okay, and then the personalities come into play because some people, you got to change with what you got.
Sure.
And then one thing about girls is when you tell them to go from point A to point B, they're going to point A to point B. Boys might go C. I'll eventually get there.
Yeah.
But and girls they want to please you.
They do.
They want to please you to the max.
I agree.
They don't want anything bad to happen. And took again. I was told that they weren't very smart. That they could only learn 5 plays, 5 sets. Because girls don't run it. That first year we had 23 sets. Because I'm a quick hitter guy.
Yeah, but it's interesting you say that because people had assessed a lower bar for them that they didn't deserve, and you said, no, I'm not going to believe that nonsense. Right. I remember I've had limited girls coaching experience, but what I've had was very positive, and I coached softball at Flora, and I remember thinking I had to take it easier on them. I didn't coach like I did football, and then we played Carmi. I'll never forget this. Carmi coach had them doing things, and they looked just different the way they did hit infield and the commands he was given. And I said, boy, I've hurt these girls by not having the bar higher for them. I learned a lesson. Oh, yeah. They can handle it. In fact, they wanted that. So I spent the second half of the season raising that bar and saying, because they deserve that.
Yeah. My basic philosophy's always been, I'm going to do anything to win. It's my job to put you in the proper position to win. And somewhere along the line, people have lost focus on that. Let's go to the Dairy Queen. We just got beat 40. But that drives me nuts. I mean, you're still going to learn a lot of things, and you're still going to have fun. Yeah. Doing it. But for some reason, that's kind of taken a slide a little bit there. I don't like that, at all. But no, I'm tough on them when they need, when it needs to be. But we have fun. There's not one player that's played with me that won't tell you that they didn't have fun.
I think sometimes girls can have more fun in it than boys. Sometimes it depends on the group, of course. But I want to say, has any sport improved more than girls basketball in the last few years?
Oh, it's going up drastically.
I remember,
the coaching's better.
Yes, and I remember watching it years ago and watching it today, and I don't know that any sport has changed for the better more dramatically than girls basketball.
100% agree with you.
It is unbelievable.
But with that being said, it still hasn't changed as far as I'm not saying at Vienna because their coach is Hill, my AD's really good about it. But at a lot of schools, you still have where the boys will get more than the girls. That's still
it's not equitable in that way. Yeah, right. Yeah, I think. But I love seeing the progress that it's made And I had a very, very smart Hall of Fame coach here say to me years ago, he goes, I've been watching a lot of girls basketball. And he said, it's a better, pure form of basketball than just the run and gun, and the athleticism of the men has taken over the strategy of the game, that the girls play a more pure, coachable, old school basketball that I really missed watching the old Lakers and Celtics and those teams. It's a lot of fun to watch now.
100% agree with you.
Yeah,
I would much rather watch a girls' college game, the WNBA, than the NBA. And for me to say that, because I grew up going to NBA games, I grew up going and watching Michael Jordan play, and all that kind of stuff. But it's the entertainment part of it. It's almost like a carnival atmosphere.
Exactly. Yeah.
The 4 steps, at a time. And I mean, it's just bizarre. If they would change it back a little bit, on some things, it'd be a lot better. But that's one reason why right now it's down. I think they said 24% the viewership of NBA games is down 24%.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah. So you're currently at Vienna coaching girls there. Mm-hmm. So you've kind of gone back and forth and so what's the situation there now? You're still having fun.
Well,
you're coaching.
I was done. Okay, I did the girls thing, and me and my wife, we travel a lot. We go all over. I think we hit every island down in the Caribbean. And we were actually going down to Panama City, and I get a call from the athletic director, Dave Hill. Hey, you want to coach girls basketball down here? No, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Then I got to thinking about it. And this is during the pandemic, mind you. Right before the pandemic started.
Right.
So and I knew they had three seniors that were really good ball players. And what the heck? I went down there and, met them and stuff. And I put them through just a basic Sesser practice. What I thought was just the AD Dave over there, he's laughing so hard he had tears flowing out of his eyes. Just the warm-ups. And I go, what's so funny? I'm like, am I doing something wrong? He goes, just what I just did in the warm-ups. They ran more in that time period than they probably ran in 3 weeks. So just, different. But it took a little bit for them to get going on that. But, once we got going, I love her to death, my point guard, Emmy Treat. She was interviewed by Channel 3. Goes, I was scared to death of them, that kind of stuff. Now she calls me almost on an everyday basis, that type of thing.
Yeah. So you plan on continuing for a certain amount of time, or
I thought this was going to be my last year. This past year, we went 29-3.
Yeah.
Great success. I told you about the strength of my schedule. We played 9 River to Rivers.
Yeah.
8-1, played 5 South Sevens and whatever Carlisle is. Felt pretty good about the whole thing. I mean, no one's can ever argue that we always play up. I have my whole life.
Sure.
But now it's at the point now, though. The 5-6 good seniors are gone.
Yeah.
You don't want to run off some of your younger ones. You don't want to get smoked by a lot of these guys. So you got to downgrade your schedule a little bit, aggravate some coaches. But you got to go with what you got.
Of course.
And so that's why I'm going to do it again this year. And there's talent way down in the 7th grade. I don't know if I'll last that long. Everything's set up good. My assistant coach is Corey Waters. He was a boys coach for 10 years. Kelsey Odom, she's wanting the job. They wanted me to prepare her. There's people, that it'll just go from one to another.
You've been blessed by good assistant coaches, haven't you? Yeah.
Overall, and, we've all had, a duffer every now and then, but I've had some great assistant coaches.
Yeah.
Brooke Williams, she was the volleyball coach, and I was her assistant for a while. What a lot of people forget is there's more to it than the X's and O's.
Yeah.
You got all that other stuff, and Kelsey Odom, who I have now, and Brooke, they thrive in that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's easier for us to concentrate on the, I call it the fun stuff. But, they take care of all the paperwork, and all that stuff that you really don't really want to do. They take care of all that.
That's so important.
Oh, it's like back in the day when I was a grad assistant. People don't. I didn't I work with the post players, every now and then. But overall, you're doing all that other stuff, off the floor.
Yeah.
Is what you're doing.
Yeah. So what do you like about the changes to the game that you like? I mean, since you've been coaching, the 3-point line has come in, and are there things you like or things you don't like you wish would change about the game of basketball?
I wish there was more consistency in the officiating. Back when I first started, I did a thing called the Legends League. This is back in the mid-'90s. I had 127 kids there, 26 teams come into Sesser.
Okay.
And about 40 officials.
Yeah.
We only paid them $5 a game, but the deal was every AD and principal, whoever was there, you opened up your book to these guys, that worked the camp.
So you can book them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Coach Korn said it was the most organized thing he's ever been in. Now, this is before, you punch a button in your calendar's all set out.
Right.
Just to give you an example, who got their starts there? Mike Austin, John Downey, David Davis. You had a lot of guys.
Yeah.
And the thing I loved about those guys is that when it came time a couple years later to do maybe a 1 and a 16 in the Sesser tournament, we're not ready for that yet.
Yeah.
They did the grade school. They did the JV.
Right.
Right. Now some officials, they'll look at the score and it's like they got to keep the score closer, or they'll point at the scoreboard. They won't call the fouls at the end of the game. To me, say one of the teams is up 30 points, whatever. In the last 4 minutes of the game, that's teaching. That's where you teach. You don't let kids get clubbed.
Yeah,
things like that.
We deal with that in football some. They feel bad for the team losing, so the kids that you put in the game late are getting held or getting interfered with, and they won't throw the flag. And like you said, it's their moment too to be in the ball game and get that experience. I agree with you. I think, and I am really worried because I kind of ended my career, and I think a lot of officials are ending their careers close to my finish. And I look down and I don't see a lot of good young official? There's some, but I don't see enough of them.
A good young official now is probably in his late 30s, early 40s, where it used to be in the 20s.
Yeah.
Now there's a couple good ones coming up. I'll give a shout out to guy Chris Roberts. He used to be the head coach at Heron.
Yeah,
and
I know Chris.
But he understands the game.
Yeah.
His signals and all that may not be exactly right, but he understands the game.
Yeah.
Which makes a difference.
It does. I'm a little worried because the IHSA has done a lot of programs to recruit people, and I'm glad they're trying to find people, but you got to find the right people that have played the game, as you said, that understand the game, because there's a lot to the game that's taking place, more than just rules, but getting a feel for what's happening and having be able to see
now,
things.
over in Pinckneyville, they do it with volleyball and basketball. I don't know if they do football officiating or not, but that's why there's a lot of good young officials coming out of that area.
Yeah, well, I hope that's something they find a way to resolve, because I really worry about the future of the game. And I know football's having to move some games to Saturday because there's not enough crews to cover Friday night.
Yeah, it's still pretty brutal.
I'm going to ask you a couple more questions, and these are key for a guy that's coached as long and as well as you have. What is the least favorite part of coaching for you? What is the thing that man, I'm not going to miss that?
Well, I'll tell you what I heard that I've never done in my life. Cutting a kid.
Yeah.
I've never cut a kid in my life.
Yeah.
Nor will I ever. I wouldn't care, and I've had 50 kids go out. But what I've done is I've put them on like a Saturday morning program.
Yeah.
And there's always one that will come up out of those cracks.
I love that answer. I had to cut in baseball at Sparta when I first started coaching. And thank goodness for Roger Gerlach, who didn't make me do it. He was the head coach, I was the assistant. And he said, give me the list of who you want, and I'll let those kids know. And it was,
I couldn't do it.
I have a 3-day tryout. Who am I to judge a kid in 3? You know who you're going to keep. You know who has to go, but it's those middle kids, you don't know.
I had a guy named Lonnie Garner, Shane's dad. He did my Saturday morning things, fundamentals to the death. I didn't have to go down there, and worry about that.
Yeah.
It was awesome. So I had this kid. His name was Joey Mottsinger. He was a PE guy. I was a PE teacher, so I always asked one PE guy, hey, where does he come out for basketball? Like a street guy.
Yeah.
Joey comes out his senior year, averages 15 points a game.
Wow, yeah.
Beats Carter. I think it was Carterville. Scott was the head coach.
Yeah.
And then the headlines of the Southern said, I got beat by a PE guy. It was awesome.
Yeah. That's cool. That's a cool story. Yeah.
Scott, he knew how I was. He was a street baller to the max.
Yeah.
Couldn't understand his
But
shot.
you found him, yeah.
Yeah, but there's always one that falls through the cracks.
What's the best part? What do you love, and what will you miss the most?
Oh, the camaraderie with the players, man.
Yeah.
With girls are different boys because I let them get away with a little bit, like when they're stretching out. They'll be out there stretching out. It's supposed to take maybe 5 to 7 minutes. Well, school's just over, so I'll let them. I'll let them chirp a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's 7. And if it's before a game, I might let them go a little bit longer. On that.
Yeah.
But just all that. That I love that. And now that I'm older, I actually let them mess with me. They joking around and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I love that part of it. Because they feel so comfortable around me.
I think sometimes when you're a young coach, you are a little insecure maybe, and you worry about that joking around is gonna.
You can't do it.
And when you get older and you get more confident, you can lighten up a little bit and have a little more fun.
Obviously, stuff that I do now you couldn't do when you're
right.
Younger.
Exactly.
Because you got to prove yourself yet and all that business. But and nowadays, I wonder if you even know. Do you know any coaches that make it past 5 years nowadays?
No, I spoke to some people last night at this award ceremony, and they were talking about how few coaches are lasting very long. And you and I coached a total of 36 years, and you've surpassed that, and we're dinosaurs, man. This is not going to happen anymore.
No, you can't because of outside pressures and other things come into play.
Yeah,
I need to go back to something.
Oh no, go right ahead.
I want to go back to my Joppa days, because I had to
say
this.
Yeah.
Okay, and the only reason is Eric Griffin. Okay, he's the head coach here, because I always got to get a little dig in on this. Okay, and when he watches this, he's going to say Metcalf. My first career win. Okay, I was playing Carrier Mills. Jeff Ritchie was the head coach. Eric Griffin, D1. Scott Scheffer, D1. playing against Joppa at Joppa. I don't let them forget it. 42-38.
That's awesome. You still remember the score,
Oh, heck yeah, I remember.
That's awesome.
Every time I see him, hey, Harry, how's it going? You know, I said, you know, I got to get that little dig in on him.
So my last question is what, I don't know if you know the answer to this, because I like to ask this of coaches that have had your kind of success, but some people call it the secret sauce. But what would you say is the thing that has been the most important thing for your success in this massive span of time? Boys, girls, small schools, different schools. What's been the key?
That's easy for me.
Oh, awesome.
It's easy. I don't play politics.
Yeah.
I never have. You know, and then with that being said, I might have to say, well, I do. I play people that's going to help me win.
Amen.
You know, that's if you're going to help me win, you're going to play. I don't care what color you are, what side of the tracks you come on.
Yeah.
It don't matter to me.
Yeah.
And everybody knows.
Yeah.
That's how I am.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter. I play the stock market with my players every day. What do I mean by that? Your stock goes up daily. It goes down daily.
Right.
Now, say you're the eighth man. If you have a couple good weeks or whatever, you got a shot.
Yeah.
You might start.
That's awesome.
I do this every day. Even as an old guy, when I get up on the side of my bed, I say to myself, ankles, calves, knees, back, stomach flu. That all correlates to coaching, because guess what's going to happen during the regular season? Ankles, calves, knees, back, stomach flu. It's going to come into play.
Yeah. One
of your starters or one of your subs is going to come out. So with my 6 through 10, I spent a lot of time with
Better be ready.
I next man up. You know, I've done that my whole life.
Yep.
You know, so
I
and
love
every
that.
player I've had know that they got a shot.
Yeah, and being a football coach, I made sure that I didn't just worry about my starting 11. I knew at some point we're going to need those other guys. I was criticized one time of maybe spending too much time on backup quarterback, and I said, we're ready. If my guy goes down, we're ready. We got a plan B, and I love that. And your guys, they stay motivated because they know they got a chance to play.
It makes your practices tough every day, because you know you might be a starter, you know, but you know, and I'll you know, you're on blue team, I'll stick your tail down on orange team. I don't care. You know, you know, and they don't pout because they understand that, you know, how it is.
Sure.
You got to prod them a little bit, you know, here and there.
And if they go down, they know they can come back up. Yeah.
But I've been pretty lucky that way, and I've never changed on that.
That's awesome.
I've been pretty lucky.
I
had about my 11th man. I told my sister, I'm going to put her in and just tell her to set a screen. All you got to do is go out there and set a screen. That's all you got to do. You know, it's like a 9-point game, whatever. She goes out there, and sure enough, she moved. You know, foul, you know, and all that. But I didn't, you know, get on her or anything. She was devastated. You know, she was dead. I go, live and learn. You'll do better next time. You know, so now, you know, she's working hard in the off season. You know, she's going to get some minutes this year. But you know, I've put some people in some pretty neat situations. You know, they've come through more times than not.
You dangled that carrot. And you gave her something to strive for, and you gave her a chance.
I think that's... How many times do you hear coaches? You know, I mean, a kid go to practice for 4 years and don't even get a chance to play. You know, I mean, you got to. You know, you got to throw that out there.
I think, Rick, as I look back on my career, people say, do you have regrets? I'm like, of course I have regrets. There's kids that I don't think I developed or gave enough chances to, that if I, as an older coach, I would have.
Right.
But when I was a younger coach, I was so laser focused on, you know, and I think over time I learned that, and I love that about, you know, you sharing that, because I love the fact that you coached everybody and made everybody ready to play and compete, and that's a cool thing, man. Family's important. I know you're active with your kids are grown now, but you've got grandkids involved. And
I got my daughter Sarah Geiger. She's a principal here at Washington Grade School. Shout out to her. And Kyle Geiger, of course. My son-in-law's the head baseball coach here at Marion. My 2 grandkids. I actually had the track meet with Lincoln, you know, yesterday because nobody else could make it.
Yeah.
And Leah's an 8th grader, so I spend a lot of time here in Marion now.
That's great.
And then my other side's over in Pinckneyville. 6th grade basketball player, Wilkie. You know, Pinckneyville, average to above average. You know, and everybody knows what I'm talking about there. And then my little granddaughter, you know, River. She's into everything.
Yeah.
Emily's secretary at the school, and she's in photography.
Yeah.
You know, so that's all good. And my youngest is down in Nashville, Tennessee. She's a school counselor, and she's actually head of the school district at 27. So,
Yeah.
you know, we're a pretty tight family. There's
Good
11
things.
of us core.
Yeah.
You know, they'll all be in. You know, it's Sunday. We go on vacation still together.
That's awesome.
You know, all that business, you know,
Well.
so I've been blessed that way.
Well, congratulations on
Thank
a
you.
fantastic career. I'm so glad you said yes to this.
Yeah.
And you blessed me today with your wisdom. And I know I've said we wanted to show and reveal to people who the coaches really are, their heart, and their efforts. And you've got a great legacy. And you
Appreciate
poured
that.
that into a lot of people, boys and girls, and you've made a difference in a lot of lives, Coach. Thanks,
you.
man.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Uh-huh.
We thank you for tuning in. Thank Coach Metcalf for being here and sharing all those nuggets of wisdom. I want to thank Swinford Media, Ross and Abby, Crown Brew. Don't forget about Swinford Wedding Videos. I want to thank my buddies at Adrenaline and Marion Plumbing for their sponsorship, and to all of you for the positives, the comments, the encouragement, the suggestions, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.